All right, let's look at American modernism. The Gallery 291 group, artistic group, it was an artistic group which centered around the figure of Alfred Stieglitz. These artists reflected the influence of modern European movements. That the gallery was equally dedicated to photography as an art form and modernism as an art style was natural, since it was precisely the invention of photography that tolled the death knell of realism. That's from Barbara Rose, American Painting. Okay, so let's start with Alfred Stieglitz. Probably nobody else in the history of photography had more of an impact than Alfred Stieglitz did on convincing people that photography is a art form and not a mechanical process. And this is from his window of the 291 gallery, where he promoted modernism more than anybody else in the United States. And then here is a photograph of his wife. He really truly saw her as his major muse. And there are a lot of photographs of Georgia O'Keeffe by Stieglitz out there in the world. So let's talk about Georgia O'Keeffe. She was born in Wisconsin, but then moved to Williamsburg, Virginia. And then she was a teacher for a while in various different places. And she became enamored with abstraction, as you see here and here. And then the story goes that she had sent some works to Stieglitz and then actually arrived in Gallery 291, and they fell in love. There's quite a bit of difference between their ages, 23 to be exact. And I think that initially they must have made a big connection through both of their artistic minds. And it was a successful marriage until it wasn't. And then here's another abstraction that I'm comparing to Martin Heed Johnson's The Magnolia Grand Flora. So we're so used to seeing O'Keeffe's very, very close-up paintings of flowers, and it's kind of hard to think about the fact that this was really pretty radical at the time, because in the past, still lifes of flowers were much more like the one on the right. This is the one that's at the Wiseman Art Museum. It's of obviously some leaves. I rather like it. I've seen it a number of times, obviously, because the Wiseman is such a great museum to go to in the Twin Cities. And then, so they lived in New York City in the Shelton Building. And unfortunately, Stieglitz said to O'Keeffe at one point, only men can truly paint the essence of New York City. And there was just recently an exhibition on this topic, New York City and Georgia O'Keeffe. And she really went out to prove him wrong, and I think that she was very successful. The one on the right is actually at Mia, which is nice. Okay, so the story goes that she and her girlfriend were going out to Colorado, and a railroad bridge collapsed. And so they were rerouted to New Mexico, and that's where she truly found her home. I've been there in the summer of 2000. Summer of 2000. And it's just a incredibly unique topography. I've never seen anything like it, and I can understand why she was so drawn to this New Mexico landscape. Okay, so I'm going to set up these still lives again so that we can compare them to George O'Keeffe's work. And this is Franz Schneider's Market Scene on a Quay. It's chock full of still life common subjects, and it's very large. And then this is Chardin's still life with a cat and fish, which Chardin is a master of, among other things, still life. And I really like the cat. And then here's one that is at Mia, and it's of pheasants. Okay, so this is all leading up to this, one of her most famous works, Skull, Red, White, and Blue. And there was a native art historian who I came across a number of years ago who was giving a presentation. And she talked about the fact that one of the reasons why there were so many cow skulls was that the federal government had brought about the end of a lot of wild cattle, so that native people would have to go onto the reservations. And so she saw this very differently from what most people would see it, as far as looking at the cow skull. And there was a huge group of artists who frequented New Mexico in the 20th century. One, of course, is Ansel Adams, the very famous photographer, with this photograph here that I'm pretty I don't know if Georgia O'Keeffe would have seen it and then did her version, or she did her. Well, hold on a minute. Let's look at the dates. Well, yeah, I mean, only 2 years apart. Yeah, so there you go. They were probably familiar with each other's work. And then again, getting back to this interesting topography that you see here from New Mexico, that was such a sort of shock to her at first. And then here's a work by Martin Hartley, which we're going to look at a little bit later, his story, which is a fascinating story. And then here's another sort of prototypical Georgia O'Keeffe piece. A group of male art historians talked about how a lot of her work has something to do with her. So I was just talking about the male critics simplifying her work, simplifying her overall artistic her artistic goals and such, and we're saying that her paintings were all about her private parts, which she rejected. There's a big book about it, and it's just an example of male critics simplifying women. When I saw this one, I thought it was. At first I thought it was. It looks kind of like a miniature thumb, but it's actually just a large pink rock with a smaller dark pink on top, and then the jawbone. I don't know why, I just really like this one. And then later in her life, she was assisted by a male assistant in her studio, and this is an homage to him, and it's probably one of her last paintings. Okay, sorry about that. My microphone went down to the ground there, so hopefully you heard that last bit. Okay, so Paul Strand was a friend of both Georgia and Alfred Stieglitz. Um, and he's a very impressive photographer. I don't know that much about him, but I do know that they shared an interest in modern photography. Okay, John Marin was actually the favorite of Alfred Stieglitz. Marin, um, I would say the way to recognize him is that he does these somewhat cubistic cityscapes, um, and they're always very colorful. And some of them are watercolors, like this one. There you go. He had a connection to Maine, as well as did Martin Hartley, who we're going to talk about in a second. And yeah, Maine was a bastion for modern artists. I don't exactly know why. I know I've been there recently for the first time, and it was absolutely beautiful. But yeah, I mean, and the Wyeths were up there a lot. It's just it's a very unique environment up in Maine. And then this is the fog lifts, and I think this is our last Marin. Nope, here's the last Marin. Yep, okay. A little bit different with this one, not as abstract, but still sort of those junting out angles that I associate with him. Okay, this is one of my favorite artists of all time. This is Martin Hartley, and this is on the left is an abstract idea of Martin Hartley. He was very tall and gaunt, and yeah, so here he is. He spent some time with O'Keeffe in New Mexico, and he developed an interest in native symbolism, as you see here. And then his most famous series is called Portrait of a German Officer. So he was in Germany between the wars when it was the Weimar Republic. It was very open, an incredible time of artistic flourishment. And he met this guy named Karl von Frieber. You can see the initials down below, KFV. And it was this first time being in love with somebody. And then, quite tragically, Karl von Frieberg lost his life in the early beginnings of World War I. And so Martin Hartley made, I think, about 10 to 12 paintings that were focused on Karl von Frieberg, and secretly because of homophobia, of course. But instead of painting a painting of Karl von Frieberg's face, he's giving you the sense of Karl von Frieberg with the different patches on his uniform. And then I guess I'm going to show you how many more of these. One, two. Well, these two. Here we go. Yeah, quite beautiful. I've actually seen the whole series in LA a number of years ago. And yeah, I really I particularly like the colors and the juxtaposition of the face of the shapes. Okay, so much like Marin, he always spends a lot of time in Maine. And so this is storm clouds over Maine. And then some lobster fishermen. Now, the title of this whole lecture is American Modernists. And so to have somebody whose height is exaggerated is all in keeping with the modernist idea. So it makes sense that we would have some unusual anatomy with Martin Hartley. Okay, so he befriended this group of fishermen, actually specifically a family And this is the patriarch of the family. Um, and then this is the matriarch, uh, Marie Saint Esprit. And if you're interested in Martz and Hartley, which I think you should be, you'll want to know that the Wiseman Art Museum, and I don't exactly know why this is true, has the whole archive of Martz and Hartley journals, works on paper, so on and so forth. So if you become a Martz and Hartley scholar, head on to the Wiseman Art Museum. And then this is his rendition of Abe Lincoln. And then this is sort of a naive, bizarre painting, Christ held by half-naked men, which is one of the strangest paintings I've ever seen. Yeah, it's a shocker, to say the least. And then now we're going to talk about Arthur Dove. Arthur Dove, I think, is the most associated with O'Keeffe. They have a very similar aesthetic. Dove was born into a rich family, and he was supposed to become a lawyer, and his parents said, if you become an artist, we're going to disown you, and that's what happened. A very, very brave individual, Arthur Dove. So everybody has a little bit of an artistic block sometimes, and Arthur Dove did. And what he decided to do was stop painting altogether and to make collages. He did it for a year. I think they're wonderful. I've seen a few examples of them. And then he went on to go back to painting. So yeah, it's kind of good advice. Switch the medium up. This is Cows in a Pasture, which stirs my Nebraska blood. And then this is Mars, Orange, and Green. And this is probably one of my favorites. I'm sure people that don't really like abstract art would not fully appreciate and embrace this piece, but I do. And this is called There Was a Cat Somewhere. All right. And then two more. He was, well, actually, I think this might be our last one. Again, simplified forms, very vibrant colors is how I would describe Arthur Dove. Okay, so the Precisionists are totally an interesting group. So it was a method that uses cubistic composition and reduces forms to simple geometry to interpret basically realistic subjects. And the first person we're going to look at is the most famous of the Precisionists. This is called Upper Deck, and they were very interested in the shapes and forms of the modern industrial world. And also Sheeler was a photographer and used photography to create his images. He was hired by, I think, Edsel Ford to make actually factory work look interesting, is the best way I can describe it. And so he did both some photographs for this, and then the photographs turned into paintings. And this is the very famous River Rouge plant where raw iron ore would go into the factory and a car would come out. And this is a little bit more of a look at, again, the mass industrial world out there. This one, to me, I mean, I wonder if far away you would think that it's actually a photograph. I mean, his ability to create realistic scenes on canvas, he was amazing. in that manner. This one's kind of a fun one. He's looking at this sort of bizarre suburban, almost looks like a moat to the left, and really what he's doing on the canvas is an interior, which is kind of fun. And then he did some interior paintings. The rug to the left is one, and upper right too, are rugs that you would see a lot back when I was a kid in the 70s. You would see them on porches and such. And you'll notice that in this particular instance, he's not necessarily interested in a realistic illusion in the painting, because the table is and the carpet are very awkward. And then, so he's got an old printing press to the right, a very modern light, a very modern chair, and also the window is incredibly in keeping with the latest style. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition between this one and the one that we just saw. Okay, so the next person is Charles Demuth, and he's probably the most similar with Charles Sheeler, but he is a bit more abstract, and he's using color and shapes and shadows more than Charles Sheeler ever would have, for sure. And then he was gay, and here's another knock against O'Keeffe. Knock against Stieglitz. Stieglitz told him to not do this type of work that was too feminine, and that it would reflect his sexuality. And, it's just an unfortunate situation with Stieglitz and this way that he handled his artists who were in his 291 gallery. And then I really like this one. Again, I think there's enough differences between it and other works by Charles Sheeler. And then this is his most famous work. I would say it's one of the most famous works in all of American art history, actually. And so it's called "I Saw the Figure 5 in Gold" and the Home of the Brave, and it's based off of a William Carlos Williams poem. William Carlos Williams was a doctor and also a poet, and a writer, and this is about a fire engine that he saw on the streets of New York City. Okay, here I think... Okay, so that was I Saw the Figure 5 in Gold, and then this is the last one of Demuth, and the Home of the Brave. And here you can see it's more abstract, unfinished. That's something that Sheeler would have never have done. Okay, last artist of this lecture, and he's a great one. This is Joseph Stella. He was an Italian-American, and this is Battle of Lights, Coney Island, Mardi Gras. Just spectacular. I love his stuff. I read a quote from him about how when he would go back to Italy, he wouldn't feel at home, and then he would come back to New York City, and he never felt at home either as an Italian immigrant. He was kind of between worlds. And his work is incredibly colorful, and it's going to get more of a sort of a precisionist vibe in a couple minutes here. But before that, I forgot, we have Tree, Cactus, Moon, indicating that he also was hobnobbing with artists in New Mexico. And it's just it's interesting to think about what O'Keeffe was focused on, what Marsden Hartley was focused on, what Ansel Adams was focused on. And so in this case, Stella likes a good cactus. And then this is just exceptionally beautiful. This is flowers. There was a recent Joseph Stella exhibition. I got some postcards from it. I don't think I'd ever seen this piece before that exhibition was traveling around the United States. Very, just a unique artist in how he approached his subject matter. And then I would imagine, I was imagined that he grew up Catholic, so you had to put the Virgin Mary in there. Okay, the last one I want to show you is a series of paintings called Voice of the City of New York Interpreted. Okay, and here you're going to get the precisionist look with the one on the left. It almost looks like a little bit of science fiction to me always. And then on the right is actually a photograph by Margaret Burke White. And then I think this is our final one, Old Brooklyn Bridge. You may remember a long time ago, well, I guess not that long time ago, we looked at a painting of one of the bridges that goes into Manhattan by, who was that by? Well, one of the Ashcan School artists. And so here's another sort of look at one of those bridges, but very, very different in the approach. Okay, that's it.